A good Sunday night live to everybody here on the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast. I'm Kevin Kelly, the freshly showered, manicured, ready to go host, creator extraordinaire, Casey Thompson. He's there as well. Hello, Casey.
Kevin, what's going on?
You're looking good, Chief.
Well, I did a little bit of weed whacking, and so I said, let me jump in the shower real quick, and then I'm like sweating like crazy after the showers.
I
Doesn't
never
make any
understand
sense
that.
at all.
I don't understand that
No,
phenomenon at all. You're in cool
I
water,
know.
and then you come out and you're sweating. You
I
lower
know.
the
I
body's
even left
temperature.
the door open. I had cold water going. I sat in front of the AC vent. I had a fan blowing on me, all kinds of stuff. So if you see me occasionally, yeah, it is what it is, and it will
It is.
not be edited out. I can guarantee you that.
That's right, because we let it roll. Not only are we live, but there is very, very little editing that, if ever, happens on this show because the staff wants paid. So
Yes,
we're on the road to
exactly.
1,000. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. The goal is to get there by
Yes,
the end of 2025.
yes,
You see,
we
I was
are.
look. Go ahead. I was going to
I
say
would,
that we
oh,
started in 2024, and now here we are rolling through this year.
we are November. I think the second Sunday in November is our 1 year anniversary of the inception of the In Ring Wrestling Podcast. So um, maybe we can plan something exciting for that episode, but I doubt it because we normally don't plan much stuff here. It's
No,
just kind of off the cuff.
we do let it
But
roll. Now, last week, for those of you that listened to our one of our most recent episodes, if you're catching up, say, in the archives, we had Rob Van Dam as a special guest. Rob and Casey, of
yes,
course, share a bond, tag team partners in an ill-fated handicap match against Psycho Sid, which left them
yes,
bruised, bloodied, battered, but richer. There was a point.
$20 richer.
Oh,
That's
wait a
right.
minute now. You stepped over a very important part there, Casey. Rob snuck in that he got 40. Did you hear that?
I didn't hear that because of the way where the headphones are and stuff. He's just talking kind of the way the layers on it. But when I was going back listening to it, I just started laughing. I'm like, oh, okay.
He got
I
you good.
thought Rob was very gracious with what he's willing to be open with, speak about. I mean, there wasn't much that he was like, shied off on. I mean, he got a little emotional. I mean, so that's
Yeah.
telling you how sincere he was when he was on our podcast.
He was talking about Sabu. And of course, Sabu's life, as Rob explained it, it was as if Sabu had a premonition and knew that his time here on Earth was coming to an end. So, a year and a half or so before his passing, made a deal for a documentary film crew to begin to capture those images. And the documentary that is released or releasing on kinema.com, that's KINEMA.com, is a look at the last year and a half of Sabu's life, all the way through his last match. And we know that,
I did watch the trailer, and I'm excited to watch that.
yeah, it's just
Looks
a
good.
picture of them riding the bikes. And I'm
Yeah,
thinking about them as kids, and I'm thinking about how they grew up. Imagine he was trained by the Sheik,
yeah,
who was,
yeah.
as we were growing up, feared, legitimately feared by fans, by everybody. Nobody protected his business like the Sheik.
Absolutely.
And Rob
Absolutely.
Van
When I
Dam,
when I
he's the keeper of the
yeah,
knowledge.
yeah, it's really crazy because sometimes you just sit back and you reminisce and you think about what has happened with how the path we went down. Just think about it. Rob had influence and trained by the Sheik.
Mm-hmm.
I had as a mentor Blackjack Mulligan, which he was there for you. It's
Exactly.
like us as kids. This is what we grew up, and this was what was we watched every week, and then how it comes full circle, and to be a part of it, and to where where we all ended up going, and now we're all back together and everything. It's really sometimes it's just mesmerizing, that is like, wow, this is my life,
It makes me emotional when I think about it, because when we were born and when we grew up, and Casey's a few years younger than me, we not only got to see wrestling on TV, which motivated us to want to get into the business. Casey wanting to be a wrestler, me always wanting to be an announcer. I always wanted to be Gordon Solie.
You never had any aspirations to ever get in there and take the bumps and, be trained to wrestle, or no?
One of my buddies who I went to matches with, talked to somebody who knew JJ when JJ was in the Florida office.
Really?
And yeah, and it was a woman, and we knew each other because we saw each other all the time at Fort Pierce. Okay.
Right.
And she said, well, if you guys ever wanted to train, I could tell JJ and you guys could just go to Tampa. And the two of us looked at each other like, I don't know. Something to think about.
Wow.
We talked about it on the car ride home, and I don't know.
That was
I
it.
was like, it's going to hurt. That was as close as I ever.
I know you like to say that. You like to always say that you're the wrestlers here, the referees here, and you're down here. I mean,
Yes.
you're the voice of the wrestling, and that's not. I don't find that to be the case. I mean, you're the one who puts you set the message for everything, for the return and down the road and everything. So I mean, I think everything is as equal, all the way across the board. I did watch something. I wanted to get your opinion on it. I watched part of some kind of podcast George South was in.
Okay.
And George was talking about, doing stuff, ended up doing first time doing TV with WWF. He walked in with two other guys I've never even heard of. And he said that he was kind of lost in the building because they weren't used to having catering and stuff like that. And he said the first person he saw was Vince McMahon. He said if Vince McMahon came up to him, shook his hand, and said, George South, knew him by name, knew everything about him. And I'm like, I thought it was kind of interesting. And then he was kind of saying that, Vince is the kind of person, how his thumbs on top of the business, how, he knew who I was and everything I did before I got there. And, if he wants you, he's going to get you because he probably already saw your stuff. And us knowing that Vince didn't watch anything.
Right.
So how, and I know everyone kind of embellishes for their own, there's the truth and then there's the wrestler's truth, which you add a little bit in, and I get that. I'm not knocking them. I'm just curious that I found it kind of bizarre that he was saying Vince McMahon knew who he was when he walked in there from doing, jobs with Jim Crockett Promotions and wrestling out in St. Louis and Kansas City and, places like that.
It's interesting. And I know
I don't mean to throw you on the spot, but
no, it's so in my time from 96 to 2003, it was well known, well regarded, and we joked with Vince about it, that he didn't know who people were in the wrestling business. Okay. And it was always like just a quick little, have you seen that? No, I know you hadn't seen that. So I'll tell you about it real quick. It's kind of like one of those deals.
What I related it to was that Vince McMahon didn't know who Mick Foley was, Cactus Jack, coming into WWF, but he knew George South. Hey, maybe he changed his ways, a few years after or whatnot,
He might have. Listen, I've known George for a number of years, and one of the things that we're going to do this week is we're going to talk about what it takes to make a money drawing program and focusing on a lot of the spoken word, how to put an angle together. It was a thing, a seed of an idea for an upcoming episode. We figured, let's do it now. And Casey, of course, having done his own booking on his own shows, plus working with Blackjack for a number of years and seeing his thought process, because he was a territory owner and a booker as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and we all,
Kevin
and
Sullivan.
with Kevin
Yeah.
Sullivan, of course, who has produced more television episodes, more wrestling matches on television than anyone else. And Jim Cornette right behind him, who I worked very closely with for a number of years, in OVW, in WWF, OVW, and then Ring of Honor. So we take from our experiences, and
Absolutely, yeah.
we're going to lay it out historically, and then what kind of needs to happen today. George
I mean,
South.
that's all this show is
That's
our
really
us expressing our experiences. I am going to a wrestling event, I believe this weekend.
I'm sorry to
Or
hear
this
that.
coming up weekend. I'm going to watch the Midget Wrestling Federation,
Oh,
Micro
okay.
Wrestling.
That's fun. That's good. Because if you were
Yeah.
going to an indie show now, I'd be like, I'm sorry.
Oh, I watched one the other day, and it's like they're teaching the body slam people the wrong way.
What, hook in the head?
So no, they're not. They come under the weird way they do it. I always did it when you lock up, you threw the guy's arm over, you hook the head, turn it where you can lay him flat. They're not hooking the head, they're hooking the shoulder and laying them flat that way. And I find it to be very bizarre. I would always
Hooking,
have the head hooked. They would hook the shoulder now,
right.
and
Hooking the
I can
head, of
tell the
course.
guy that was training them all that way because
Yeah. Explain why hooking the head
it looked weird too.
why do you hook the head? Because
Lay him flat,
you don't want
protect the neck.
right.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Tom Pritchard teaches, don't hook the head. That the way you lay them flat, they have to tuck their chin, but you're laying them flat like this. And by hooking the head, you knew what you were doing. But by hooking the head, instead of getting them to go flat, boom, they go with the head hooked, they go boom, boom. And you want to
You know what
avoid
I
that.
find even really funny is Dr. Tom, his old tag team partners who trained me, Jerry Gray, and they wrestle identical to each other.
Yes.
You know, it's really really bizarre. And then I have a kid that I know through my son's wrestling. He fought a little with I think Bellator and UFC. He's trying to break into wrestling. He's going to some uh, wrestling academy in Michigan. I don't even know the name of it, and if I
Okay.
did, I wouldn't even tell it to you because it's not even worth. So he had his first match. I told him, I said, you're doing yourself a disservice. He's been training for like 3 or 4 months. I said, you're doing yourself a disservice having this match because what happens is people think that they're a wrestler and this and that. He's getting trained so badly that it's like they lock up and they stomp. I'm like,
Mm.
you're in a little building. You don't need to stomp. I said, then when you move in, you're stomping as you guys are walking. Like you look like it's just. So what I did is I put this match up on the big screen. I filmed it and I talked and stopped and I said, listen, you asked me to go from A to Z, pick it apart. I said, I'm gonna sound like the biggest asshole in the world because this is what you wanted though. I said, take it, use it. I said, it's not gonna hurt you. I said, because a lot of the stuff you're doing, I said, you're hitting the ropes. I said, you're in an 18-foot range. You take 3 steps, turn, hit the ropes. I said, use the rope to propel you off. I said,
Mm-hmm.
you're hitting it and then running back. I said, you got to use it to your advantage. I said, the first thing they're going to look at in WWE is your footwork. If you don't have good footwork, they have nothing for you. You have to develop that right off the bat. So I gave him a little insight what he should be doing and things like that. And then his punches were like, I'm like, bro, I said, you're a fighter. Why are you punching like Fred Flintstone coming down like bonk? He said, well, they say that you come down, come down like this and hit him in the collarbone. I said, whoever did that, you need to punch him in their face. I said, the best way to learn how to punch is to hang a tennis ball and punch it and try not to move that tennis ball. I said, or if you really want to get brave, use a mirror. And if you break the mirror and fuck up your hand, then that's not a good punch. I
I
said,
know
but
that Mike Mondo,
it's
who
crazy.
Mike Mondo currently wrestles in the NWA. I know him, of course, from ROH. He was in OVW for a number of years. Rip Rogers, heavily influenced, trained guy. Rip Rogers had great punches. Rip Rogers said 1,000
yeah.
punches a day. And you will get good. Mike Mondo, to this day, 15, 20, I think he's over 20 years in the business now, still does that every day.
When I used to walk around the house punching, and I'd go to my mom and boom, throw a punch, and every once in a while I'd nick her, and she'd be like, "Ah!" And she'd try to kill me. She'd like come back and stiff me like a little crowbar. I'm like, "Mom, you're a little tight there. Relax, you know."
They wanted.
So
I heard when Casey wrestled, they wanted Casey to punch them for real. And when Casey asked why, he said, "Because your working punches are killing me." So anyway,
yeah,
that's a Ricky
it
Morton
could
joke.
be.
Can you please hit me for
Yeah, it
real?
could
What do you
be.
mean? Your working punches are killing me.
Brother, do I owe you money or something?
So we
Yeah.
know that storytellers like George South, for example, are important. And if you watch any of George South's most recent stuff in AML, where he talked about he was getting an opportunity at the NWA World Title. And here's George South all these years into his career, and he's wrestled Ric Flair, and he's wrestled every, NWA champion over the past, whatever there was. The NWA not being what it is anymore, but he always wanted an opportunity at the NWA World Title, never got. And Tom Latimer, current NWA champ, was going to be making his way down to the Carolinas to defend the title. And George South wanted a chance. And just to listen to the stories that George told about having what this opportunity would mean, and then what it would change his life if he won, it put it over the top for me. Because at first you go, okay, it's old timers day. Anybody can have an opportunity, and Tom Latimer is going to take it easy on him and spend some time in the ring with him. And then when the time is right, Tom Latimer is going to beat him. But that's not what George South convinced me of. He convinced me that not only did he deserve this opportunity, but that he could win. That's storytelling. That's an art. Not everybody is blessed with good storytelling capabilities.
Right.
And does that mean, Casey, that if you're not a good storyteller, you can't talk people into the building?
I think it really helps to be able to.
Can you get by on pure emotion?
Tell a story.
Was Goldberg, did he draw people?
One of us is having a connection problem.
Casey's frozen food there. He's sitting there like a fish stick. The point I'm making is, did Goldberg talk people into the building? No. Did he get people to come to the building with his presence? Yes. Short matches? Yeah. Just awesome presence. And you knew you had to see it. The epitome of an attraction. But one of the things that we're going to talk about, hello there, sir.
Yeah, my hardwire, it sucks, so I undid it and went with my Wi-Fi. So
you were
what I was saying was, what I was saying was it helps a lot be able to talk them into the building. I mean, it's not absolutely necessary, but if you have it, you're going to make a lot more money, especially back in the territory days.
Back in the day, you didn't have to be, and I used Goldberg as an example, somebody who didn't really talk. I was
thinking of that.
And had short matches, but what drew people was the phenom, the presence, the awesomeness. You got to see it. He's the epitome of an attraction, and so you had to see him once.
Yeah, because everybody was like, to see that streak, and absolutely. And I think they should have kept the streak going a lot longer, because once you get him wrestling, into a 10-minute match, you kind of lose the whole appeal of Goldberg, I think.
Andre the Giant was billed as never having lost a match before he went to WrestleMania 3.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's keeping the streak going for decades, for at least 15 years.
Right.
And, because he started in 72 and they went back, through his career in the 70s and said up until this time in 1987, Andre the Giant's never been beat. And Andre didn't get beat a lot. He did get beat by the Sheik, ironically enough. Sheik threw fire in his face. And stole away with the victory. But so let's and then of course there's the whole language barrier thing. Can wrestlers who don't speak English, can they can they cut a fiery promo? Heck yeah, because I don't need to know what a Spanish-speaking wrestler is saying, but he's saying it with power and presence. I'm going to be like, whoa, this guy's hot. You know, the Savio Vega, Ray Gonzalez promos from IWA in 2003, 2004. That drew a ton of money, you know? So, and that was in Puerto Rico, folks. We're not exactly talking about New York City. We're talking about, you know,
Absolutely,
the island of
yeah.
Puerto Rico.
And Puerto Rico is still was a like an old school ran like an old school territory. They're not, and they were like in they're probably up to about the 90s now with the way they do things and everything. So yeah,
It,
being
you know,
able to
going to
talk over
weekly
there was
towns,
important. Yeah,
and being able to talk people into buildings on a weekly basis was the challenge that wrestlers
yeah,
had back in the day. When you looked at weekly territories like Florida, like Tennessee, Memphis territory was a weekly. Georgia seemed to be like a 2-week. Some of the towns like Columbus and Macon were every week. Atlanta was every other week, I think, or every 3 weeks. So it wasn't quite a 1-to-1 ratio, but and then New York, of course, the WWF was monthly, big shows in the big buildings with spot shows every other night. And you had the opportunity to build more time between a match. But if you had to go on TV Saturday
right.
morning and talk people into the building in the Memphis Coliseum, Mid-South Coliseum, for that Monday, man, you better get it right. Because
Well, absolutely, and that's
11,400, yeah, 11,400 ain't going to show up organically. You got to tell them. And
yeah, that was the
that's why
difference in
Jerry
the
Lawler was so
territory
good.
days. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
there were weekly towns, and like we go back to Florida where we come from. Every Sunday night was Orlando 80 Gram Sports Stadium. So and boy, it was always. Did you ever go to there to watch wrestling?
Never. I went and sat outside when the building was being torn down. I
Oh
sat in my
man,
car in the park outside the gate, and I watched it being torn down. It was
I
sad.
wrestled the last match ever there.
You were in the main event
I
of the
was in the
last
last
wrestling
match.
show?
Yes, I was.
Jeez. Do you remember who
It's
you wrestled?
Blackjack Mulligan. Blackjack
Oh, it was
Mulligan.
you and Jack, huh? Did you
Yeah.
know that that this was going to be the last show?
No. No. Mm-mm. No.
Because he was training
They
guys
had a
from there,
battle
right?
royal after that. What's that?
He was training guys out of there, right?
Yes. Oh, we had back in the heel side dressing room is where the ring was. It was really, really cool to be able to walk through that place. All those times from sitting out there in the stands, in the bleachers and everything. And on the one side, when you're sitting at it, on the right side was the baby faces, on the left side was the heels. And it was like a big door, big roll up door in the middle. And you're always wondering, oh man, what's it like back there? It was just a big room, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But it was the coolest thing when I went back there, and the old ring from the Eddie Graham is the ring he used in there.
Oh,
So that was really cool too. Had like weird turnbuckle covers. One said NWA on it and everything. If I was smart, I would have snagged one of them. But as looking back 25 years from now, I'm like, man, I should have really been more into keeping, memorabilia and stuff like that from places I've been, posters and things like that. Have been fun. But yeah, the territory days were hard because they would have your top, baby faces, even heels, because heels could talk into the building. You had Kevin Sullivan, Cowboy Ron Bass,
mm-hmm.
guys like that they would talk about how they're going to whoop their butt and all that, and that would draw people in there because they wanted to see the big babyface Barry Windham, which was not a great talker. He was decent, not great, but he had so much sympathy and fire with the people that they wanted to see him beat the guy that was doing all the talking, Ron Bass or a Black Bart, or J.J. Dillon would bring in Abdul the Butcher and guys like that. So, man, it is man, those were the good days. That was like the glory days of wrestling for me
I know.
back
I feel
then.
the same way. You know, when you look at it at a heel, like like the Assassin, for example, or an Ernie
Yeah.
Ladd. They
Yeah.
were like Jody Hamilton, amazing promo. And you
Yeah,
looked at him
absolutely.
and you said, that's a fat guy in a yellow mask. Nope. He absolutely knew what he was doing in the ring. And his
Yeah,
voice had such presence to it and
absolutely
believability.
did.
The Masked Superstar, Bill Eadie, another one. And those promos, when he would promo off against Wrestling 2, for example, who was a little old man in a white and black mask, okay?
Yeah.
And he sounded as country as you could get, because he was. But he had fire and he had believability, and the people believed in him. But
But if
Masked
he didn't
Superstar,
have the mask on, he wasn't believable.
no, he was Johnny
Yeah.
Rubberman Walker. He was an old guy. And
Yeah.
he, because he'd wrestled in the 50s. So here he was in 30 years in the business. And, Wrestling 2, of course, prolonged his career. But Masked Superstar had tremendous presence in promos. Ernie Ladd, I go back and I listened to those Ernie Ladd promos from Florida when he sat there with Gordon Soley. And part of the reason why I always say announcers are here and the talent is here is because of a line that Gordon said in one Ernie Ladd promo. And Ernie Ladd's blowing him off like he wants to know if he's down here in Florida to try to collect the bounty on Dusty Rhodes that the world champion Harley Race has put on. And Ladd is blowing him off. And he says, you're just a TV announcer anyway. And Gordon Soley turns it around on him and says, I'm well aware of my station in life, sir. I just want to know, are you here to collect the bounty or not? And Ladd finally gave him the answer. So it was such a great Gordon line. But I always remembered that. I know I'm just a TV announcer, but I'm going to ask you again. And I'm not going to let you
Right.
go until you give me the answer.
I don't think Florida wrestling would have been. I know we're talking about all the great, talkers and stuff like that, but I think these territories, each territory has a commentator, an announcer that people, they're like a generational announcer. They remember Florida and Georgia had Gordon Soley, so
Yep.
Memphis
Tennessee
had
had,
Tennessee had theirs. Everyone had one, but I don't think they would have done the business without those type of guys like a Gordon Soley. I think he was a great talker that brought so much. He could lay a story out. You could be a blind guy watching wrestling with Gordon Soley, and you knew exactly what was going on.
yeah, there's an art to it, to be a storyteller, to describe the action, to blend because he could go from 1 minute, let's say he's calling a match with Coach John Heath, who of course had a great, was an amateur coach, and they could talk about the subtleties and the nuances of the armbar or whatever, and then you could get into the next segment and talk about Kevin Sullivan throwing ink in Dusty Rhodes' sister's eyes and being
Yeah, that
suspended
stuff
by
is
the
so good.
NWA for 90 days. And here's the letter from
Yeah,
NWA President Bob Geigel, and said with the same level of credibility as he's describing with Coach John Heath, an amateur coach, about the reality of the armbar. So that's the art and that's the value of a commentator. But somebody like Les Thatcher, very underrated commentator. Of course, Lance Russell and Dave Brown in Memphis. Lance had a ton of credibility because he stood up to the heels. Bill Mercer in Texas, Dallas's announcer. You had Paul Bosch, who was the promoter in Houston, and he did his own commentary, but everybody knew Paul Bosch, and so therefore he had credibility with his audience. And you want to have that credibility and that consistency. And people grow up with you and they get to know your voice. And then, of course, you become part of the fabric of their viewing experience. That's telling a story is, of course, a big part of it. But if you're putting an angle together, Casey, how do you, as a booker, as a promoter, and as a television producer, because we got to have all three, how do you layer things? How do you like to layer things so that it's different, it's unique, and it draws the most money possible?
man, I think I kind of kept it very old school for myself when I did it, and I tried to make it relatable for people in the real world. So I got heat with you, Kevin, and it's because of this. And then we just start kind of peeling that onion, all the layers on the onion, and develop it, more as we go. And without having guys under contract, you couldn't go too far out because you might go to do a TV tape and a guy can't make it because he has another booking or he's hurt or whatnot. So it made it a little rough. And so, especially when you're doing 4 weeks of TV, that's 4 weeks of an angle that could get, shot out, shot down because, you know, you don't have anyone under contract. But I like to use real world, relatable, sim- very simplistic booking, nothing crazy, but then you added the heat to it, and then I my guys, I would give them the I guess the freedom of being able to turn on their personalities and add to it and everything.
Mm-hmm. When you, and I'll say it like this, because if you're a promoter, right? So you're a promoter, you own the company, and you're the booker.
Yeah.
Promoter says, put the match in the ring this week. Well, wait a minute, we're not ready for it yet. Well, I want the house. I know it'll draw.
Right.
Yeah, but we have to hold off on it. So there's the immediate push and pull with promoter and booker. And the territory owner is trying to keep the peace between the promoter and the booker. And a lot of times the owner was the promoter. And the more hats you wear, the more convoluted your thought process becomes. But so you when you're laying out a story, and of course you have to have different, you can't have them all peak at once unless you're doing a Starcade. And then you have the blow-offs there, and then you book return matches
Right.
all fall long after, let's say,
Yeah, I
after the
would
Great American
stagger
Bash Tour.
everything.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're moving one feud from here on the card up to here. But you got to get there step by step, right? Now, if something gets a big reaction, do you change your plans? This is hot. I need to capitalize on it. How did that immediacy affect your booking ideas? I've changed my mind. This is hot. We're going to run with this now.
I guess yes and no. I mean, I would to a certain degree. Yeah, also I had to realize when I was doing TV, I had a big outlet, so I wasn't just booking for that town, that one particular, arena that I was, running my shows at. So I didn't use that mindset. And I was fortunate enough to have a money man that had a lot of money behind him and didn't care if I was turning a profit yet
Mm-hmm.
because he was looking for the end goal. And so it gave me the ability to stretch things out longer and not have to worry about. I knew certain angles is gonna pop real big when I got. I'm just going off the top of my head. I did a match once where I had a guy, the Blackheart, Dave Johnson, and um, something happened. In basically, it was a 6-man and Myers, basically Hack Myers um, dressed up as his tag team partner, one of the guys in the 6-man, and basically they set it up where the Babyfaces he would screw over everyone all the time, all the heels, but they thought it was the Blackheart, but they realized because he'd turn around, throw his mask up, that he was pretending to be the heel Blackheart, but he's actually Hack Myers.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed a little vignette in the back, where they jumped them and tied them up and stuff like, stupid stuff like that. But, you know, they didn't understand it quite at the building, but on TV when they seen it all laid itself out and everything. So, you'd have to, him showing the mask, were people and us keeping it off of camera and stuff like that. So you get the reaction the night of the event, but also for TV and everything.
See, now that's
So,
smart because you had to
yeah,
realize, in the moment that the live audience doesn't understand what has been shot in the back,
yeah,
and but we have to smarten them up to a certain extent without blowing the whole deal. And
right,
we don't want to show this on TV because we want the big payoff later. So
right,
that's where you're serving a lot of masters. And I think that what a lot of bookers do especially today, those that are putting shows together get too smart for themselves. And they overthink things and they overproduce things and they really relate to nuance. This little subtle thing, this look, this something. Whereas me, it's good versus evil, and good is good
Yeah,
and evil is evil. And evil is going to
absolutely.
do their best to try to shut down good once and for all, but good is going to triumph in the end. And if you do that, I think it's going to take care of itself. Now,
And it
how you
works
get
every
there,
time
it does. It's always worked every
because it's
time.
believable and it's real. They can believe it and what's the word I'm looking for? Not
Relate to it.
reliable, but yeah, it's relatable. There it
Mm-hmm.
is. My
Yep.
mind. It's relatable because everyone in life has had something where I don't like that person, and it could be they looked at me wrong or said something stupid about the outfit I was wearing, something like that. But that's how old time wrestling started, stuff. I remember old WWF where who was it? I think it was someone with the Iron Sheik where he was going to the ring, the other guy was coming to uh leaving the ring, and they bumped shoulders
Oh, I
and they
love
made a
that.
big angle out of that. And I thought that was incredible.
Yes. Was it Morocco? Was that how they turned Morocco babyface?
I think so, but I was just like, this is, and all it was is them hitting shoulders,
That's all it takes.
you know?
Steve
They
Carino
didn't
was a
need
big
30
believer.
writers for that.
No,
Yeah,
Steve Carino was a big believer, and he booked his own shows. He booked for 01. He did a lot of stuff, and of course is heavily involved now. And he was involved with Ring of Honor, and now he's a producer with NXT. He always believed that the heels don't necessarily like each other. Okay, the baby faces will watch each other's back, but at the end of the day, a heel is a heel, and he doesn't trust anybody, and he's
well, that
looking
makes
out
a
for
lot of
number one,
sense.
which is him. So if you have two heels brush, immediately they're going to turn like you did that on purpose. Whereas the baby faces, if they bump shoulders, they would go, "Hey, my bad." So it's the philosophy of what the wrestler in question would think. So a Hack Myers, for example, doing, stealing the gear of the Blackheart Dave Johnson, he's going to do it differently than somebody else would because Hack was a no rules kind of guy. If you would have done it with, say, somebody who's more of a straight laced babyface, like somebody in the mold of a Mike Graham, okay,
Right.
who's, amateur wrestler, plays by the rules, this and that, it's going to be completely different. Hack could do things like that and get away with it because people loved Hack Myers for being who he was. Now, let me ask you this. There were a lot of familiar themes, shall we say, back in the day. Because you would watch, we saw Florida, and then our TV watching began to expand with cable. And we got Georgia, and we got Memphis, and we saw New York, and we saw all these different things. And you start to see the same angle in other territories. And that'll smarten people up in a hurry. Um,
Oh, yeah.
I, I know Dr. Tom talked about Pepper Gomez doing the deal where the guy jumps off the ladder and lands in his stomach, and then the third time, he jumps off the ladder and goes across his throat. And he saw that when he lived in El Paso, and then he saw that later on when he lived in Houston. So red light goes, ding. Oh, okay. Tropes, as we would call them. The things that heels do to get heat. Tying the Indian babyface in the ropes and plucking his feathers, stealing his feathers, and beating him up, but that destroying his headdress. A situation like that was very common back in the day. Did you avoid those old type of things, or did you lean into them because you realized people remembered a good feeling or a bad feeling about it, and it would draw emotion?
I did a little of both. Sometimes something would come to me and I would try to think it out. And I think, who was it asking in the chat
Oh yeah,
if,
we got chat galore. I hadn't opened the chat yet. I'm
yes.
sorry, guys.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Scott asked if I used to go backwards. Sometimes I would go backwards if I knew someone that was going to be there. So basically, in booking, you'd book backwards. You want to know where you wanted to get, and you'd work your way back to where you're starting from. Yes, I would on some people like that because I knew they were reliable. They would always be there. I didn't have to worry about it. Um, but to answer your question, I would do a little of both.
Mm-hmm.
I would do some of the old school stuff that I knew that worked, and then some things I would just kind of sit there and be like, just I guess like any writer or any comedian, any singer, anytime they had a thought, they'd write it down
Mm-hmm.
and go back to it. Can I do something with this little, a finish? What can I do with this finish? And how can and not and to answer another question in the chat, they asked how many angles should be on one show. I think it's different if you're doing TV and or if you're just doing a regular, um, show that doesn't have, television. You're just doing a spot show or a little, house show or something like that. Myself, I'd have like we were talking, I would stagger my angles where they all weren't starting at one time and ending at one time, because then you have a couple weeks of kind of boring TV because there's nothing exciting going on. So I'll try to have two exciting things going on in an hour program, and then I would flip it back and forth. So I'd have four things going in my promotion, and I'll flip it back and forth, and then I would start a fifth thing. So where I'd always have it staggered going, always something going, going and things like that. But
Right. And you probably had like 10 other seeds of ideas if the time was right.
well, absolutely,
When the time is
yeah,
right.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
and that I think that's one of the best skills that a great booker has to have is knowing I got too much going on right now, or I don't have all the pieces. I know this is a great idea and I know this will draw, but we're not ready for it yet. But I'm going to remember
yeah.
it.
I mean,
And when the
like you're
time is right,
saying,
I'll get back to it.
yeah, exactly. I would have seeds going where I could put something out there where it meant something if I wanted it to, or I could leave it and it would just go away. If I wanted to turn it on, if I needed, I could turn it on and it could develop into something really fast.
You
So it's a lot of
so when you had a team like the Vandals, right? Smaller guys, modern day Rock and Roll Express, for lack of a better term.
sure,
They were a cross
yeah,
between, they looked like the Hardys, but they sold like, Ricky and Robert. Is it different when you're saying, okay, so I've got this new tag team, young kids, smaller guys. I can get a ton of heat with them a lot of different ways, but the straightforward, most easiest way is to separate one from the other and beat them up, right? Get the sympathy. But there's only so many times you can see that.
yeah, yeah.
And then so what do you do in a scenario like that do you keep running new guys at them, or do you do things to cool them off and let them get some wins? What's kind of your thought on that?
I guess I guess it kind of depends. Um, those guys were like super baby faces. So I told them they had to go out there. They had to go out there and go in the crowd you know, and I said, and you guys have to sell, 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 sell. You have to sell. You have to get that sympathy. Once you get that sympathy, they can get beat down. I think they can get beat down all the time. It don't matter as long as they get that comeback once in a while. You leave the people happy once in a while, not all the time. Once in a while, you got them going, because if you once you they get that to that level, and it could be on a small promotions television. Once to that your fan base, once they got to that level where they want to see them win and by any means necessary, you got them hooked. So you can do a lot of stuff to play with the people's emotions,
Right.
So you can do the
And
whole, I mean, it's all bullshit stuff. You can do the thing where, oh, the guy broke down, he's not here, so the heels double team on him, leave the kid laying, and they do the Spirit of 76 at the end of the show, and he comes in, and, when they're out there, the heels are out there wrestling, and come back, and they, start peppering both of them, the heels and everything. those people are going to be going crazy for that stuff.
I remember in Ring of Honor, we did something with, so we were in the process of turning Kevin Steen babyface, or we had turned Kevin Steen babyface. I can't remember where we were in the deal, but we were I think we were in Toronto, which probably helped, or we were in Chicago, which, again, another great town for Ring of Honor. And Jay Lethal was the babyface who was in this 1-on-2 situation, and I can't remember why. I think his partner may have hurt himself, and we took him out. And then when it's time for the hot tag, Kevin Steen came running out, jumped in the corner, and put his hand out. And the place blows, and then he gets the tag, and the place blows again, and then he blows the big comeback on the heels, and they lost their minds. So you could do something really quick. You could do something that was in the moment. We didn't have any seeds that Kevin Steen was going to come out and help Jay Lethal. There was no interaction between them. It was just in that moment. This is the moment where Kevin Steen can cement himself as the babyface that we want him to be. And it got over like a zillion bucks. And so there was always that. There's always that element. You could always do something as a surprise. And I want to ask another question, because this was a thing that ECW got into and some promoters get into, and I see it as a slippery slope. We always have a surprise on the show. You never know who's going to show up. Okay, great. But then doesn't the crowd anticipate a surprise every show? I remember in the Survivor Series 96 when we had advertised that there was going to be a surprise, and everybody thought it was somebody jumping ship from WCW or somebody coming in from ECW, and it wound up being Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and the people at the Garden went
shit on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. That's a very slippery slope. Because the fans get, well, I mean, a lot of times people aren't even going to do surprises because they want the promotional value out of it. So I didn't care about that because, like I said, I had a guy, so if I was gonna, I'll give you an example. I was using an authority figure, and it was called the director of operations, right? And I built it probably uh, 5-6 weeks. I put so much buildup on it, right? The whole time I already had booked and everything was good for Bobby the Brain Heenan to be it, and it
wow.
was going to be great. All of a sudden, right before he called me, said, "Hey man, sorry to do this to you, but my agent called me and I got to go do Leno or Letterman, because he wrote that book. He was on a book tour. He said, my book tour comes first." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, whatever." He's like, I apologize and all that. He was really cool about it, and I was cool about it. But I didn't tell people who it was. I didn't give no hints, but I just, and so I was like, man, what am I going to do? And I had people watching. I remember my friend Paula that's married to Billy Gunn. They're like, "Hey, who's the director of operation? Can you just tell us? You got to watch and find out." She's
Yeah,
like,
buy a
"For
ticket.
real?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "We're sitting here watching it. We want to know." I'm like, "Well, you can't."
Right.
Because she's like, "Why?" Because I don't know yet. She's like, "Get out of here." Because first off, I started the angle before I known who I wanted. I just knew where I wanted to go, and I could put Jim Cornette, anyone in there. It didn't matter. But I wanted to get someone because Bobby was local in Florida, so there was no flight, no hotel because he would have went home back to Tampa, a couple-hour trip and all that. So I ended up just throwing in one of my wrestlers. He wrestled named the Punisher. He looked like an Undertaker, like 6'7", 300 pounds, just jacked guy. I mean, it kind of shit the bed because he couldn't really talk but it's like, what can I do? It's part of I guess the glamour of being in indie wrestling. I
Yeah.
didn't have guys under contracts, and I wanted to ask you. I know I'm changing topics here. What was your Well, I'll tell you, two of my favorite angles ever in territory wrestling was one in Florida where they had Cowboy Ron Bass and Barry Windham, the Saddle.
Yes,
match. Remember that?
I do.
That one, and I think one of my favorite angles of all time was Tommy Rich in Georgia with Ted DiBiase when he was Mr. R.
Yes.
And they did this switch where it was Tommy and he won the national title and everything. I think that was like one of the coolest angles ever.
When you
Do you have
look
any
at
ones
what,
like that stick out to you that?
well, obviously, I mean, the one that stands out to me the most was the assassin coming back to Florida and pretending to be the legendary Mexican wrestler El Santo, and is going to present Dusty Rhodes with, some presents, some tokens of his appreciation, and finally was a plaque, for all that Dusty had done. And then he takes the plaque and whacks Dusty over the back of the head of it and pulls the silver kind of cowl off, and you see that it's the assassin. And oh man,
It's sort of the put it in a box and it will sell, huh?
exactly.
Theory.
There are certain things that always work, and that always worked. And the assassin was somebody who didn't necessarily, if you announce the assassin is coming back, okay, the assassin is coming back, but they really wanted, Dusty was booking, and they really wanted to come up with something elaborate. And Jody was all into it. He lost a ton of weight. He wanted to come back looking different so that nobody would expect
Oh, wow.
And it blew. Forget it. Sold out. The other one, of course, they had done prior was
what
with
year
Don
was
Morocco. That? Oh, gosh. 80.
Was 82, it 81? 79 to 81? 79 to 80?
No, I think it was like 81.
Bugsy told me that. He told me, I think Bugsy told me about that time, and he said Dusty was on top and they were selling out every night. He said the territory was on fire. That must have been the angle right there.
That certainly helped.
Wow.
And then before that, 78, 79, Don Morocco had been an underneath babyface, left the territory, went all over, came back, and was under a mask. And the Magnificent M, he was called, and he was destroying people wearing this black mask. And he used a pile driver, and they shot hidden camera. A cameraman went back to the Sportatorium after shooting a promotional commercial and realized he had left his camera in the Sportatorium. And when he picked up the camera, he realized there was some wrestling going on in the ring, so he starts to shoot it. He doesn't know what it is. And we've got this piece of film we got this tape that we want to show you. And I think it speaks for itself. And then they roll it, and they had this giant dummy, and it was Sir Oliver Humperdinck leading the Magnificent M on hitting the pile driver. Right?
Wow.
And that's where Soley got pushed out of the chair. Right? Nobody ever put their hands on Gordon Soley. And then a few weeks later, they unmasked him, and it was Don Morocco who shaved his head.
Wow.
And the promo wasn't necessarily clear, but what he said was he was the only guy to ever beat Jack Briscoe. And he should have been the NWA World Champion, and he never got his chance because he couldn't break through. And now he was back, and he was sick of it. He was sick of everybody, and he was going to get even for all the people that had held him down. So those little things, sometimes it happens in one TV episode, like the assassin as El Santo. There was no setup to that.
Right.
And then sometimes it happens over the span of weeks and has layers to it, like they did with Don Morocco. So those were just two that come to mind. And of course, the Ole Anderson, the turn of 1980 on Dusty Rhodes, that's perfectly documented on YouTube. You can watch it in its entirety. I did the promo with Cody and the bus in Japan, It's
like... Speaking of Dusty, do you remember, and I'm sure Dusty was the booker then, do you remember Mike Davis as the Dream?
Yes.
So they're booking the Dream, and you think it's Dusty Rhodes, because it happened to me, came to Fort Myers, it was the Dream versus someone, and you're like, that's freaking Mike Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And he changed, and he was pretending to be Dusty Rhodes as the Dream, and because it happened before they did a loop of house shows, I guess, before they showed it on TV. And I happened to be in there at the house show, and I'm like, wait a second, that's not Dusty the Dream, And that was a pretty hot angle too back then. With he turned with Kevin Sullivan and everything.
I have a question here from Scott. Kevin, have you ever heard of the Jeff Costa roller skate match? Yes, I have, Scott. Jeff Costa,
Wow.
of course, as I mentioned, the Lobster Man from New England. They did wrestling in a roller skating rink, Casey, and
I've been there.
they put wrestlers in roller skates, and there you go. And
No,
had a
wow.
oh yeah, did the toilet bowl match. Maverick Wild got dunked in the toilet in the middle of the ring, and then came out and they had a Baby Ruth in it. And he comes out with the Baby Ruth in his mouth.
I've done the thing
Jeff
where I
Con-
went into the bathroom during the match and then come out with like a 10-foot string of toilet paper out the back of my trunks and everything.
How many times did Kevin Sullivan come out with the toilet seat around his neck? We saw that with
Oh
Blackjack
yeah,
in
I have
Florida.
a
We saw it.
picture. I have a picture of me and Kevin fighting in the bathroom on TV for a little promotion down in South Florida.
That's awesome. There are things that always work, okay? And
Absolutely.
I think that too many people go, oh, that's and this was a Vince Russo thing, okay? Vince Russo was like, oh, that's wrestling. That's old wrestling bullshit. And we need to be different than that. We need to be more savvy than that. And the viewers are smarter than that. And everybody knows that it's an angle. Yes, everyone knows it's an angle. It's called angle alert. And you get tingly all over when you know an angle is happening. Okay? And not everything can be a shock or a surprise. Sometimes things just have to be what they are. And it's okay to have an angle alert. Because then you give them, and this was something we went through in Ring of Honor. It was getting to where every match had to have something. Okay? And I was just like, and then it was like, we needed to use Mark Briscoe, and we didn't have Jay. And I'm like, it's okay to just have Mark Briscoe in a match. There doesn't need to be a payoff or an angle. Because I got 3 segments that I've already talked, that I can do a little recap while Mark Briscoe is kind of walking the dog on some youngster. And we've got still the big main event to come. It's okay to have a match that cools the people off a little bit because we got so much yet to come. And we've already seen so much. So you can give them the peaks and the valleys within the body of a show. But Russo believed that every segment had to have something. And you
Or
either
shock
burn out of
value.
ideas, you burn
Right.
the people out, and the main event isn't as spectacular.
Because the formula of wrestling is you build up to the main event. He wanted it, and he made it, and I'm sure the boys liked it then because he made it where everyone mattered on that card. Like everyone could be a main eventer. So the boys liked it because they're getting more attention on their segments and everything.
Right.
So, but
Which was good and did help, because you
yeah,
could take an undercard act and you could put a little bit of steam on it, and now it's got a sizzle when you get on the house shows. So, because JR would book the house shows, and then depending on what would happen on TV, he'd have to come in on Tuesday and rewrite all the house shows for the weekend that was upcoming, because we just switched 3 people babyface or 2 people heel and switch this belt and switch that belt. And now he's got to redo the whole card. But it did help. He gave impetus to Crash Holly with the hardcore title and 24/7 rule, and little things like that. Val Venus's stuff had a shelf life, but still had interest. And, so there was always a way to give the underneath matches some steam and some merit, which was always good for the ticket buying public. But it did lead to some last minute changes that weren't always appreciated. The guys that liked Russo were the underneath guys that he paid attention to, and the guys that didn't like Russo were the main event guys who understood what wrestling was, and Russo was speaking Greek to them. And they tolerated him, they put up with him. I know the Undertaker hated
now,
it.
do you think you have to, in order to have a great angle, you have to have a great talker?
Well, okay. You didn't need one with Kane and the Undertaker, because the Undertaker at the time wasn't saying a whole lot, but you did have. So yeah, you do. And the two narrators of that was Paul Bearer, who was a tremendous talker. He told the story. And Jim Ross, who described the action as it was unfolding in front of us. Paul would set the stage as to what was going to happen with the backstory and what was to come. And then Jim would talk about the here and the now, tying in the pieces of what Paul had said earlier, the history, and Jerry Lawler being the agitator to stir it up. So the participants don't necessarily have to be great talkers, but you got to have somebody in there who can tell that story. And if the story makes sense, then the announcer can do it. But if the story doesn't make sense, here's the problem you run into. It screws your
That's more
credibility.
modern TV. But in the territory days, they had to be able to talk, though.
Of course, you didn't have that option.
Yeah.
You had to be a great talker.
You know what I find
wait a
funny
minute now.
about having...
I'll give you for instance of a territory guy who did well but couldn't talk a lick was Bobby Eaton. But Bobby always had somebody with him. He had Jimmy Hart when he was in Memphis, and then he had Jim Cornette.
Right. Now, I find it really funny is you have the greatest talkers, and that's where we started, and we got in a rabbit hole. But
yeah, always.
That's how this show goes. But the funniest thing is the greatest talkers. You have superstar Bill. You know, the greatest talkers in our big business: Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and superstar. Everyone stole from superstar Billy Graham. You know, Flair did, Dusty did, and then Ric Flair stole from Dusty. It was just it's like they all stole from each other.
Dusty stole from Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
Hogan stole from superstar Billy Graham.
Well, yeah, big time.
And so superstar Billy Graham was the impetus for a lot. Was the seed of a lot. But again,
yeah, he was the OG.
Yeah, he was
the
definitely.
OG talker was superstar Billy Graham.
But there was a lot of Southern preacher in a lot of what the guys did. So if you listen, and you could hear a lot of it as you were driving, which I always loved, finding some great talker on the radio. And now people can listen to podcasts, and you can listen to a great talker. And you can get some of that pattern, you can get some of that style and some of that flavor. You also, and Dusty was a big movie guy, right? Because a lot of Dusty's angles came from movies or from the characters in the movies and what they represented. He was John Wayne, right? And John Wayne was always going to come out on top. But boy, the heels were going to get their heat on John Wayne until he came back and riding on the horse and, ran roughshod over everybody and got the heels out of town.
Which talker did you prefer? Did you prefer a loud screaming like Dusty, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, or a slow, drawn out like Jake the Snake, which he was an incredible talker too.
Amazing. Blackjack Mulligan, for example, Get Mama from the Kitchen, throw all the kids in the pickup truck. That type of conviction. Jack didn't always yell. He would always speak forcefully. And sometimes when Dusty would bring it down and he would say, I'm going to come and I'm going to get you, something like that, any change to me was always great. If you looked at somebody like, let's just say he wasn't a great talker per se, but he had fire and conviction in what he did say, was Tommy Rich in Georgia as a babyface. Because a lot of times Tommy Rich would start as, well, Gordon, I'm just here and I'm happy to be here. I love the fans' support. I love the support of all the people. And then the heels would come out, mess with him or do whatever. And then he would come back and jump on the mic, maybe with his suit torn or whatever. And he'd be like, somebody say something about getting fired up, and now you got him. Now you got him.
You know what? I watch a lot now of the old territory, and I find it really, really interesting how like, okay, we're gonna have say West Palm Beach auditorium on Wednesday night or whatever, and they talk to multiple people, and you'll have like someone talking about, oh yeah, well, you got Mike Rotundo's wrestling Ric Flair for the world title, and it's multiple guys talk about different matches that are going to happen at that particular night on that card. You ever notice that back in the day?
Yeah, and again, they had to do, so Mike Rotunda would have a week's worth of promos to do all at once. And, Monday in West Palm, he's wrestling somebody. Tuesday in Tampa, he's in a tag. Wednesday, Miami Beach. He's got Ric Flair for the NWA World Title. Thursday,
Well,
Lakeland.
no, but what I'm saying is other guys that are not in that match,
We'll talk about,
you'd have,
yes.
yeah.
I see what you're saying now. I completely love
Mid-South
that.
did it. Georgia did it.
Love it.
Yeah.
I think, hey, I just, I'm going to be, wrestling on the card, and I'm looking forward to being there, and I'm looking forward to getting the win. And then after that match is over, I'm going to draw up a seat and I'm going to watch my friend, Mike Rotundo, or I'm going to watch as that no good snake in the grass, Mike Rotundo, who stole my shot at the NWA World Title. I'm going to sit there and watch him get humiliated by Ric Flair. Yes, I loved all that stuff.
I wonder why they did it. They did it where they could build seeds in to develop things, angles out of it, I wonder. Because it was like every territory did it back in the day.
No doubt. And yes, they did it to give me matches out of it. Because
I meant to ask Bugsy, because he's the only territory guy really around that I even talk to, and because there's not a lot of them around anymore, that
right,
for him to explain and tell me the reason why they would all talk about, oh yeah, Ric Flair's going to be there.
They didn't do it all the time. They did it occasionally. And sometimes there would be involvement. And again, you've got to get out. You've got to have Ric Flair retain the title. And you don't want to beat Mike Rotunda because he's a babyface on the rise. So we get the heel involved to pull the foot, to do something, to distract, to give Ric Flair the brass knuckles, whatever it is, so that Flair wins, but the heat is on the heel who screwed Mike Rotunda out of the world title. And now
you've got an angle too.
Now you got singles matches coming out of it. A lot of times you would use the world champ as the conduit to get a rivalry going, heated up, whatever. And the most famous example of that was Ted DiBiase and Dick Murdoch in Louisiana, and it was the way they turned DiBiase babyface. And they've done that any number of times. They did it. Ron Fuller did it in Pensacola with Ric Flair, with Bob Armstrong as the special guest referee, and everything was set up for Ron Fuller to finally win the world title until, lo and behold, Bob Armstrong turns on him. What the hell? And it was the only time in his career that Bob Armstrong turned heel.
He turned heel?
Yeah.
Wow.
So Flair
escaped. I wonder how did that go over with the people?
I don't think people were happy. I don't think it lasted very long.
He was someone they always wanted to be a babyface.
Yeah. Now, there are certain guys that you can't turn heel. You couldn't turn Kevin Steen heel in Ring of Honor. Cornette wanted him to be a heel in the worst way, but you couldn't do it because the people liked him, and there wasn't anything you could do. You couldn't turn Bugsy McGraw heel in Florida because the people liked him. There's certain guys that you
modern
just
wrestling. They made a mistake turning Stone Cold heel.
Oh my God!
They even admit that now. They never should have done it.
But they had to do. But Steve wanted. See, now this is okay. I see both sides. Steve needed something to freshen up his act. Felt he had gotten stale. On the downside of his career physically, but knows that he can get away with being a heel now because I got all the smoke and mirrors of the WCW guys. And he wasn't going to have to work hard. He was going to, be able to elongate his run, only to eventually turn back babyface again. And he could ride herd on all the WCW guys who he had previously been aligned with. That was the thought. With The Undertaker, turning him into the American Badass was a way to freshen up his act. He didn't have to turn heel per se. He just needed to change his persona, change his look.
I think that was the most believable character he had out of all the variations of it.
People didn't like it, but I loved it. I thought it was
I
awesome.
did too. I couldn't get. I remember watching him go into the ring with that hat, carrying the urn and all that, and I'm like, to me that was cartoonish. I
Mm-hmm.
never seen it having the longevity that it had for 20 some years on top.
Right. Now,
I mean, it
when
did obviously.
when he went back to being the regular Undertaker, it had a new modern twist to it.
Yeah.
So it worked, and it again was how he kind of rode off into the sunset. But he wasn't wrestling a full schedule by that point, and he was able to kind of wind down and still be part of it. And you got to realize too that some of these guys, as they start to get older and as they start to age out, we knew in the territory days that there were certain people that were aging out. We saw that a lot in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when George Scott became the booker, he freshened
Mhm.
up the territory and brought a bunch of new talent in. But what does it take to be a great talker? It takes conviction. Wahoo McDaniel was not a yeller and a screamer, but he had a lot of credibility with me. And
Oh, he was believable. Yeah.
yeah, and especially because he was sort of that, he would come in and come out because he wrestled everywhere. And it was always my good friend Dusty Rhodes called me, or my good friend Wrestling 2 called me, and I came in,
Yeah.
and it was always like, oh, good, Wahoo's here. Now shit's going to be on. Okay. And he wasn't like this fantastic dynamic talker, but he was believable. And then when he was a heel, I really believed him. Boy, what an axe he had to grind. And I'm like, this guy's making a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then,
So we
excuse me.
haven't talked about. We haven't mentioned anything about all of our that relates to any of our all of our AEW listeners out there. So, um, MJF, how do you think he would rate as a talker back in the territory day?
He would be top. He would be the top talker in any territory he was in.
You think
You would
he's
have,
the modern day wrestling right now? You think he's one of the top talkers out there?
well, absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes I think he goes a little too inside baseball, and says too much. But no, he's if not he's one of the top talkers in the entire industry. He's fantastic. He's great. Trying to think of
Cody
somebody
would
that
be up there.
Cody definitely is up there because he has believability and passion.
I think
Anytime you
talking about Cody. Cody has Cody is like the ultimate. I mean, you said a couple weeks ago in one of the things that he did so much stuff like customer service. He did everything when he was in
right,
AEW. I saw that, and I was watching some videos where people go there with their figures to get them signed and stuff. When they're done at the end of the night. Cody's usually always at the end. He comes out of the ring, coming to the back, and he signs stuff for people,
mm-hmm,
and everyone else just walks right by him. He's like the ultimate like baby face right now. That I think he actually cares a lot about it all. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way he was brought in the business, and he probably learned from his dad that these people really matter because they can actually put that rocket behind you. The fans can to help escalate you and build you and everything. But I see and watch a lot of stuff that he does that he's not getting paid for or things like that. And he gets involved and does stuff for people like that.
right.
I think that's really really cool.
Well, there was, and again, there was the Bret Hart model, which may have been the Hogan model before that, but, um, you know, Babyface doing this with all the people. Then it was Bret, and Austin wasn't that guy. Shawn Michaels wasn't that guy. And the next one that I remember doing that was Rob Van Dam when he was champ, and he wrestled last. And it was a house show that I went to. It was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I went back at intermission, and I saw Rob and said hi, and hadn't seen him in a while, and introduced my son to some of the people that I knew back there. I was still working with the company at the time,
Oh wow.
but I wasn't on the road, and so I just went back and watched the show. We were sitting kind of out of the way, and we had a whole section to ourselves, but it was fine. And then I watched Rob do that afterward, shaking hands, shaking every hand around ringside. And I was like, that's really good. That is fantastic customer service. Cody goes above and beyond it, and, was the customer service division of AEW. If you had a problem with your seat, he would see it on social media and he would say, I'll take care of it for you. Wait, what? That's the type of guy he is. And AEW has not been able to replace him. Who has replaced him is Tony Khan, but Tony isn't that, gregarious a person. He will,
Right.
if he sees something like that, but mostly he's just going to be about promotion. And,
Right. And he's not just has wrestling. He does a lot of other stuff too with soccer and football.
right.
So I mean, he's
Like I
being
noticed,
stretched all over the place.
yeah, like I noticed today, he tweeted out while the NFL games were on, it's nice to be able to sit and watch football because I guess the Jags play on Monday night. So he didn't have anything to do that day. So he was able to just watch football. And Anthony Bowens, who I think is a really underrated babyface, messaged him. And as a subtle way to promote a match that's coming up on Collision, where he's forced to be teaming with his old partner, Max Caster, the former Acclaimed, coming back together. And he's like, hey, while you're enjoying football, I wanted to get your thoughts on maybe changing this match for this week's Collision where I have to team with this guy. Go Jags, Duval, I was like, that's well done. That's using social media in a good way. I didn't see if Tony responded. I forgive me, I didn't get a chance to see that, but I hope he did.
So if you had to pick one wrestler out of all the years you've been a wrestling fan in the business and everything, who would be that spoke to you the most? Who would be that one talker that is like, you know what, he's my go-to guy?
The Rock is
The
up
guy
there.
that when he talked, it meant the most to you when you heard him speaking.
The Rock had a lot of that credibility with me because everything that he said, he did. Right? And then to go back, Ric Flair. I was not, having grown up in Florida, I was a Ric Flair guy and not a Hulk Hogan guy.
Yeah,
So
of course. Yeah.
Ric Flair was my champ, and when Ric Flair talked, I listened. And Dusty and Blackjack were two in the same. Kevin Sullivan scared the shit out of me. Ole Anderson scared me.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of who scared me as a kid. Joe LeDuc scared me.
Oh yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
Joe LeDuc, when you get that crazy eye, and I loved that. I loved all of that stuff. But yeah, I would say that those guys, modern day, it's The Rock, because he could take a scripted promo and he could make it sound like it was his own. And then Flair and Dusty, probably in that.
Was Stone Cold's promos scripted, or did they just give him bullet points and said, do your thing, or just go talk and do what you want to do?
Bullet points. He'd go over it with Vince. What do you want me to say here? How do you want me to get to this? I'm thinking this. Because Steve put a lot of time into thinking. He was a thinking man's wrestler, as they say, and he'd want to know ahead of time what I'm doing so I could think about it and come up with ideas. And that didn't always work with the way Vince Russo wrote TV. So it would be frustrating for Steve.
Imagine.
And Vince kind of fell into that trap, Vince McMahon, because he was like, oh, it's okay, pal. We'll come up with it. But it didn't make Steve very comfortable. But yeah, those were the guys, I think, when you looked at the older guys, the more established names, the ones who had come up through the territory system, that they didn't like the scripted promo. Because they weren't they weren't comfortable with memorizing somebody else's words. I wouldn't say this, but I have to say this. What's the rules? And it just made them very uneasy.
Well, yeah, because they're all about the believability and emotion
never say
behind
this.
it. And
We heard that all the time.
yeah,
I would never say this. And they weren't in a position, they could go and fight with Vince, and Vince would most of the time put the whammy on him, and then they would come out going, oh, yes, I love this promo. This is exactly what I'm going to say. But
I think one of the best talkers ever, and we haven't even brought up. I mean, we talked about him a little bit, but we didn't really talk about him being a great talker. I think would be Vince McMahon himself.
Vince McMahon was a tremendous promo.
Yeah.
I always thought that he was the Howard Cosell wannabe on commentary, especially when, in the early 80s, late 70s TV. I just, ladies and gentlemen, this Monday night at Madison Square Garden, you're going to see superstar. I'm like, I get it. Howard Cosell.
I have
but when he
wrestled
was a
matches
heel,
that Vince McMahon was calling, though.
Ooh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool. I was always,
I've had him.
when I got to do promos with Vince, forget it. I loved it. Who did you wrestle that Vince did your match?
Oh. One of them was Sid one time. One of the million times I wrestled Sid, because they were promoting. They were promoting some bodybuilding thing, and Vince was talking about the picture. It was on the screen, the bodybuilding, and then it went to me in the ring. He's like, "Oh well, I wasn't talking about Casey there."
What about this guy as far
Piper
as
was
top
good.
talkers? What about this guy?
Yeah.
Piper?
Yeah, there's so many of them out there that we like. Roddy Piper was incredible. He had so much emotion behind it, and his emotion was believable. So, people
Bobby
would
Heenan?
just, yeah.
It was.
He's a funny. Did you ever talk to him on the phone? Or,
I did an
I
interview
would
with him.
talk to him, and it's like, oh, I mean, he would call me, and we'd talk, and it was like I'm listening to a stand-up comedian on the line, just talking. It's like he'd crack joke after joke. Whether it was funny or not, you're still gonna laugh because it was Bobby, and you're gonna show him the respect.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, it's
There was
everything. He
so
could
much of
make
that.
a joke out of everything.
When you look at announcers too, somebody that doesn't get, but kind of isn't in the first category, the first page of announcers, because he wasn't necessarily a play-by-play guy. But what about the importance of a Gene Okerlund to do those interviews and to ask the question, to do the setups, to explain the angle? You're going into Boston Garden this Tuesday where you're going to be taking on the Junkyard Dog. What about it, Greg Valentine? Even something as simple as that.
And that wasn't scripted back then either. That was
No.
all him just. And a lot of times he would had to come back to them, off of what they were saying. So that was all, ad libs, just right off at the cuff and everything.
Yeah. You had to
Yeah,
be.
he was good.
And again, how he got started. He was a disc jockey. And this in the era when disc jockeys weren't just reading off of cards, everything that's, written out for you. Here's what you say in this break. Here's what you say in that break. He was coming up with his own stuff. So to young wrestlers out there, because there are young wrestlers that listen to this show, that watch us, that see us, that talk about it. I've done hundreds of seminars all across the country where I talk about how to be a better talker. And the best advice that I could give anybody to start is to start by talking. Because now we're in a texting world, Casey, and we all text each other,
Yeah.
and we may not necessarily call on the phone and speak. So a lot of young guys aren't great at talking, and I think they've got to start by speaking. And that could be, I don't want them doing wrestling promos. I want them just reading out of a book. By the way, reading out of a book is another great way to develop promo skills, because the author is going to come up with, hopefully, colorful language that you could borrow, steal. And it's a Cornet line.
Right.
Stealing from one is plagiarism, but stealing from everybody is research. So whether it's rock and roll lyrics, whether it's books, movies, wherever you're getting dialogue from, if you make it your own, then it's your own. So don't be shy about reading and taking from other people, because you don't want to fall into the trap. Because when you're by the way, to your friend who's, 3 months in, he's learning that, the training may not be that great or whatever, because Casey, pulled his match apart and told him 50 things, but nobody's going to be writing dialogue for him for his promos. He's going to have to come up with it himself. And when you're starting, most of the promos on the indies are terrible. And that's okay, because you've got to practice. But you can practice every single day without recording it or without it being seen. You can record yourself and watch them back, have a friend watch them, whatever. And these are just the things that
I
I talk
remember
about in every
driving down the
seminar I do.
road, listen to the I remember driving down the road, driving promos. Did you ever do that when you're first getting into wrestling?
All the time.
Doing like some announcing stuff and things like that, or have you ever watched a wrestling match on TV and did a play-by-play yourself when it was the show was on mute?
Mm-hmm. I still do show opens. I still do promos in my mind. I came up with a scenario the other day and I ran it by our buddy Bob Evans, and I was like, I don't know if anybody ever did this, but because Mr. Wrestling 2, they were always going after his mask, and you could have a match with Wrestling 2, but if you went after his mask, then it turned violent, right? And what is it that I was always waiting for the heel to say, what is he hiding? Now, they would just on the surface say, well, he must be a criminal or something like that. But what if the heel would have said, I know your secret, or I'm going to learn your secret. And when I learn your secret, Wrestling 2, the reason why you wear the mask, I'm going to tell the world. And Wrestling 2 would be like, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't have any secrets. But regardless, yes, I still do that to this day, Casey. I practice all the time because it's just who I am. It's, I do wrestling promos constantly in the car. Did you guys, when you would travel to towns, did you guys practice promos in the car?
No, I don't. Maybe once in a while, a couple people, but no. Be honest, no. I could say yes, we did and everything, but no. We just talked about like, oh boy, I got one punch in. He didn't sell it, but I gave him a couple, punches here or there. Or, yeah, I got to move in or this or that,
But wait a minute.
So,
and then you would talk about so-and-so got this girl, right? Or so-and-so did this.
Oh, yeah.
Colorful language, colorful storytelling. That's promo practice. If everybody sits there asleep,
tell you a story
except for
quick.
the driver, if everybody sits there asleep except for the driver, then nobody's getting anything out of the trip. But if there's a storyteller, and if that gets everybody talking, makes the trip go faster, and everybody's gotten promo practice in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I do remember once we were in, it was in Georgia, I want to say, or maybe Montgomery, Alabama, or Anderson, South Carolina, one of those areas right in Georgia. And there weren't a locker. The only thing it was pipe and drape that separated the locker room to the crowd with a barricade there, so people hold it open and look through. And I remember once I'm standing next to Flair, and I'm standing right behind Flair. Flair's looking out, and some girl's like, "Hey, psst, psst, hey, come here, you." And so Flair's like, "Oh, how Rick is." So, "Hey, get him for me, get him for me," and it was me. And
What?
he's looking like, excuse me. And I'm just a job guy. It's Ric Flair, the world champion. And he's like, "What does she want?" And I said, "She asked me to meet her by the TBS trucks after the matches." And he's like, "Oh, okay." Of course, we had a double shot, so we left for the next town right after the matches or everything. But it was kind of cool that she picked me over Ric Flair.
Damn.
So,
what's Casey got that I don't got? Says Ric Flair.
So as
That's
we're
awesome.
talking, everyone out there, keep my good friend Joe Gomez. After last week's show, I called and talked to him, and I talked to him. I'm like, "Boy, Joe, I see you all messed up, bro." I thought has he been drinking? He's like, "Oh man, I had a stroke about a week and a half ago." He's like, "Please, please, watch your blood pressure. Don't take it for granted and stuff like that." He says, I'm doing okay. I'm getting better. He says, but luckily I was around people that could get me to the hospital and everything. and all that. So, but
Right.
yeah, so just keep him in your thoughts, your prayers, whatever you believe, but he's Joe's a good guy, you know. And even then I was like, yeah, I was calling, I want to get you on the show. So, I'd love to be on the show. I'm like, ooh, what's up with you, Joe? He said, oh, I had a stroke. I said, well, you know what? I'm gonna let you go. I'll check on you later on. If you
Yeah.
need anything, I'm here. It's like, oh, I love your case. I'm like, I know.
Uh,
So,
well,
just
when
keep
Joe,
him in your thoughts and everything.
yeah, man, when Joe gets feeling better, we definitely want to have him on the show because, like you said, he's a guy who knows everything and was there for
Oh boy.
everything. That's what we
And he
want.
remembers it all. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
That's
Yeah.
incredible, so hopefully Joe does get better quickly. And I think we've covered a lot of this topic here for tonight, and I think we've given people food for thought. And what we'd like to do is, of course, comment, like, share, subscribe, put some comments down. Who did you like? What did you like? Go back and watch these people on YouTube and just type in the search bar Ric Flair promos, Dusty Rhodes promos, Roddy Piper promos. But then some of the underneath guys, and George South, where we started talking. Listen to George South. Listen to the old school as they were. Listen to the old school talkers. Somebody asked about MXPW as well, Casey, and
Wow.
the ability to watch that footage. Do those shows exist on YouTube?
There's a few individual matches here and there, but no, as a whole, no. I've been thinking about converting them. You know what? I gave my partner the only DVD set I had of all of them. I had the whole series on DVD. I have all the masters that, but I would have to convert them over. Maybe one day I might do that.
There you
But I
go.
have them all. They're all sitting right up there in the top of my closet.
That'd be awesome to
So,
maybe put together a YouTube channel, or maybe just add it to this YouTube channel with the MXPW shows in their entirety, or individual matches broken out, or whatever. I think that would be great to see where we were during that time. Because it's going
oh,
on,
wow.
what, 20 years? It's over 20 years.
Longer than that?
Jeez.
My son was born 2003. He's 22, and that was the second show we had because Dusty was on it.
Wow.
Dusty
I
wrestled
was there.
Barry in a bull rope match.
I was there for it. I loved it.
I can tell you how stupid I was. I had Dusty and Barry both signed the cowbell, and I
Yeah.
had it for years and years, and I sold it to someone, and I kicked myself in the head constantly. Constantly. Like, why did I do that? Oh,
Well, I'm sure it was for top dollar. He made you a price you couldn't.
well, yeah, it was actually I sold it to Todd, that I worked with for years, um, that wrestled for IWF. Was he the? What was Todd? Had the big hammer.
Thor. The Incredible Thor.
Thor. Yeah, that's it. Thor. I'm losing my mind. Yeah, I
Well,
sold
he's
it to
dead.
him.
He's
He
dead
gave it
now.
to. Yeah, I sold it to him, and he gave it to as a Christmas gift to
I'll bite you.
um one of his buddies
Yeah.
that he owned a club with. So I mean, he was a big Dusty fan, so we went to a good place. But man, that was a good piece of memorabilia that I. And then another thing, I had an autographed picture of Dusty Rhodes where he was wearing the NWA title, and the background was a shower with those blue tiles. You can see that online. I had it signed, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, and MXPW. We did an auction for American Cancer Society, and I
Mm-hmm.
gave that. I think it sold for like $600. People
Oh,
were giving the money
yeah.
for charity.
That's
Yeah,
really
so
cool.
I mean, it went to a good cause, but man, I wish I had that still.
Right. And of course, back in the day before cell phones, taking pictures and having those memories captured forever. I think about it like all the times I drove blackjack and been like, hey, lean over, let's get a selfie together. We never did that, but
I know.
um,
The last
all of
time I
that
was with
stuff.
him, I was at his house for like 5, 6 hours. Me, him, and Barry, one of my buddies, he came with us. We were out there on the porch talking, and I was like, and I was like, you know what? He already had like Big Mac sauce on his. I brought him a couple Big Macs, Big Mac sauce on his shirt. And I was gonna get a picture, but I said, you know what? I don't think he would want. He would. I don't think he would want to,
Right.
because he wasn't what Blackjack that we all know and want to remember was
Right.
at this point in his life.
Yeah, I know.
So, but I still had the memories of knowing that. You know,
We
I
always
still
have the
have
memories.
Facebook posts come up with him commenting on stuff, talking to me and stuff like that. So, but yeah, he was even Kevin Sullivan. I do have some pictures with him. Um, a couple of shows when I redid. He was one of my partners with a wrestling promotion. I try to, you know, bring back to life and everything.
Hmm.
So I had some pictures with him. I have a picture with him at his house and that he had in Washington. So, but yeah, but I did get one with Bugsy.
Hell
So
yeah, I remember that. I love that
yeah,
picture. Two of
my
you looking
girl's like,
great.
"You better get a picture." I said, "Bugsy, I got to get a picture." He's like, "Oh, okay." Yeah, so
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the In Ring Wrestling Podcast. Really took you behind the scenes this week of what it takes to be a great talker, and what it takes to put an angle together, and how it all works from the talent perspective, from the promoter perspective, most importantly from the booker perspective as well. Casey, it's a fun ride as always, and I'm looking forward to doing this again next week.
sounds good.
All right. So for Casey Thompson, I'm Kevin Kelly, and we'll see you next time on the In Ring Wrestling Podcast.